Okay, in this video, we're going to do heart anatomy, and I'm starting off with a little blank slate here because I'm going to dumb it down quite a bit, and then I'm going to take you to the real heart. Realize that in the heart lecture number 1, there was some heart anatomy on there. It had to do with the fibrous pericardium and the serous membranes that go around the heart. So if you'll please review that, that would be great. Okay, so this is not at all what the heart looks like, but this is how I like to describe it. We have you're going to have 4 chambers to your heart, 4 open areas in the heart. Think of them as 2 separate units. We've got the right side of the heart, doesn't look anything like that, and the left side of the heart, that doesn't look anything like this. But it is almost Valentine's Day. Okay, now, so notice that there is a separator between right and left sides. There are 4 chambers. The upper chambers are not quite so large, but we'll draw them like this. We've got 2 upper chambers, and they're separated by what we call a septum, and 2 lower chambers, they're separated also by a septum. The 2 upper chambers are called the atria, that's plural. This is your left atrium. You have to know the difference between left and right for this chapter. Remember, we're in anatomical position, so what looks like the right side is not really the right side. And here is the right atrium. Well, the atrium is singular. The atria are the receiving chambers of the heart. So what I mean by receiving chambers is blood comes into the heart through the atria, and then blood's going to leave the heart through the 2 lower chambers called the ventricles. This is going to be a right ventricle, and this is going to be the left ventricle. Now, the ventricles are the pumping chambers because they're going to pump blood either to pulmonary circulation, which means the blood's going to go to the lungs, or to systemic circulation, meaning blood is going to be pumped to the body. So the ventricles are pumping chambers. How many chambers do we have? Pumping chambers? We have 4 altogether, the upper receiving chambers and the lower pumping chambers. Now, in the next picture, you're going to see all the blood vessels that I'm drawing anatomically incorrectly here are actually at the top of the heart. This is just a visualization so you understand how blood goes into the heart and out of the heart. This is not anatomically correct, except for this septum between the atria is called the interatrial septum. Sometimes you can't see it because there's so much going on in a heart model or a picture or when you're dissecting, but the interatrial septum, you can see if you angle in and look through that right atrium or vice versa, look up in the left atrium over if you're doing a dissection. This is called our interventricular septum because it's between the ventricles, it's interventricular, and a septum separates 2 things. So that's our first part of the anatomy. We have 4 chambers, 2 upper, 2 lower, separated by a septum. Essentially, we have the right side of the heart is going to be involved with the pulmonary circulation, receiving low oxygen blood and sending it to the lungs. And the left side of the heart is going to be involved with a systemic circuit where we're going to be receiving high oxygen blood from the lungs and send it out to the rest of the body. So blood, let's start on the right side here. Blood comes into the right side. Now, it's not like it's going to come into the right side and then out the right side and then in the left side and out the left side. We have equal volumes of blood flowing through the right and left sides of the heart. If 5 liters of blood per minute goes to the left side of the heart, then 5 liters will go through the right side. So blood's coming in both the atria at the same time and out the ventricles at the same time. But we're going to teach the right side first. And the blood that comes into the right atrium comes through the superior and inferior vena cava. Now, vena cava, that's plural. Nobody says it. The superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. But if you are talking to your science friends, call them the vena cava. The superior and inferior vena cava are going to have low oxygen, high carbon dioxide blood coming from the body, and it enters into the right atrium. And notice how I left a little gap here. That blood will go down into the right ventricle. but there's also another vessel that puts blood into this right atrium. And all of this blood is from the body. Well, the heart is an organ itself, and so the heart needs to be serviced with its own blood supply, and that's going to be called, the blood supply for the heart itself is called coronary circulation. I believe we've already talked about pulmonary circulation and systemic circulation, and we'll talk about it again. Coronary circulation only deals with the blood piercing the walls of the heart and servicing the heart. While the heart is hollow and full of blood, that blood does not nourish the myocardium or the epicardium. We have to have blood vessels going through them. And then the blood vessels are going to take the used low oxygen, high carbon dioxide blood and put it into the right atrium. We're going to see the blood vessel that does this in subsequent slides, but it's called the coronary sinus. So we have three things emptying into the right atrium that I want you to know, which would be the superior vena cava. It's draining blood from anywhere above the diaphragm. The inferior vena cava, it's draining blood from the body. It's receiving blood from the body anywhere below the diaphragm. The diaphragm is the muscle that sits at the base, that you've got the lungs and the heart and the diaphragm's underneath there. All the blood, say from your toes, from your stomach, etc., is going to be coming up through the inferior vena cava into the right atrium. And then whatever services the heart, that blood, which is low oxygen and high carbon dioxide, is going to enter the right atrium through the coronary sinus. So we have a unit of blood here, and it's going to flow down into this right ventricle. When the blood flows into the right ventricle, I'm going to pretend like there's an exit here, but it's not. It's really up here, if you can see my little cursor. But I'm not an artist, and so I'm saying the blood leaves this way. So blood's coming in up here, and blood comes out down here. And on the right side, we are sending blood to the lungs. So it leaves the right ventricle through something called a pulmonary trunk. Some people go straight for the guts of it and they call it the pulmonary artery. Remember that arteries take blood away from the heart. Veins take blood to the heart. So the coronary sinus is a vein, the superior and inferior vena cava are veins, but this pulmonary trunk is taking it away. So it's an artery. Now the pulmonary trunk it's going to go up from the top of the heart, and it goes to the left lung and to the right lung. And that's going to be weird on video, but I was doing it from my right and my left. But this pulmonary trunk branches into the pulmonary arteries. Left and right pulmonary arteries, which we will see in a picture coming up. So this blood is going to the lungs. To lungs. And the reason we're going to the lungs is we're going to drop off our carbon dioxide. So when we exhale, we can release that carbon dioxide, and it's going to pick up oxygen. And the oxygen, that highly oxygenated low carbon dioxide blood, will be returned to the heart. This time to the left side of the heart. So it goes from the lungs and it enters into the left atrium through 4 pulmonary veins. Now these pulmonary veins, called veins because they're entering into the heart, they're sending blood into the heart, but they're going to be colored red because they're coming from the lungs. And this blood is high oxygen, low carbon dioxide, because we've just been to the lungs. So we've got 4 pulmonary veins that feed into this left atrium, and then the blood goes into the left ventricle. Now this high oxygen blood needs to go out to the body, So the left side is receiving blood from the lungs, sending it to the body. The right side is receiving it from the body and sending it to the lungs. We gather that. The left ventricle, when it pumps and sends that blood out to the body, sends it out through a vessel called the aorta. This is the largest artery in your body. It is that big artery that's full of elastic tissue, if you remember your histology. But I think that this is a great way to summarize the heart. Of course, I think it's a great way because I'm teaching it this way, right? But if you don't understand this, there are more pictures coming up. Notice that there's no blood going this way or this way because we have the septum separating the right and the left atrium. Same with the left and right ventricle, no blood going this way and that way because we have the low oxygen blood on this side and we have high oxygen blood over here. We don't want them to mix, right? So that's the importance of that septum. Sometimes people are born with a hole in their heart. And if it's a hole down here, that's a big deal. That is a really big deal because there's fetally, when you're a fetus and an embryo, you don't start with holes down there. You do, however, start with a hole up here between the right and the left atriums. Sometimes that hole doesn't close and people are born with a patent foramen ovale. So this hole, the hole between the right and left atrium, is called the foramen ovale. At birth, it's sort of a flap-like transition due to pressure, but when the child is born, that foramen ovale closes. This is a hole. It's a diversion, so we can send in a fetus, blood's going to come into this right atrium, and we don't want to send blood to the lungs because in a fetus, they're not breathing in oxygen, they're in amniotic fluid. So we'll divert that blood right over here to the left atrium and pump that oxygenated blood that the fetus received from the mother out straight out through the aorta. Pretty cool, right? But when we're born, we want this hole to close, and it does close, and it leaves a little, I wouldn't say scar, but you can see it, called the fossa ovalis. So when you look on a heart model, try to find that fossa ovalis. The foramen ovale was a hole to divert blood in a fetus. The fossa ovalis is what we call a fetal remnant because it's left over from those fetus days, crazy fetus days. Okay, so look for the fossa ovalis. Now you know what the foramen ovale is. There's going to be another hole that I tell you about. If that doesn't close, they say you are born with a patent foramen ovale or a PFO. And a lot of, quite a significant portion of the population is born with a PFO and there are no consequences to it. However, if you have a loved one who has a stroke and they're young, like in 50s or younger, then they might have a PFO because a lot of times that is one of the causes for what they call cryptogenic strokes, hidden strokes. Why did they get this stroke? They'll look for a PFO. Okay, here we go. Now we're going to see what the real heart looks like. Doesn't look anything like that last picture, does it? First of all, I want to tell you that I drew this picture where it was half the right side, half the left side. When you're looking at the heart, you're looking predominantly at the right side of the heart. The left side, you just see some of it and it goes around the back. So the right side's in the front and the left side's in the back. So let's see how much of the right and left side we see. This is our right atrium right here. This, from here to these blood vessels and over all of this area, that is our right ventricle. So we have our right atrium over here and our right ventricle. Look what they really look like. We have blood coming in through the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava into this right atrium. Then the blood will flow into the right ventricle. And if you recall from the last slide, when that right ventricle pumps, it's going to send the blood out to a pulmonary trunk. And if we're going this way, we're going to the left side. I know we're going to the left side because I see this thing right here. The pointy part of the heart is called the apex. If you see the apex, if you have trouble with your rights and lefts, look for an apex. If you see the apex, you're on the left side. So here, when I said the blood comes in to the right atrium, then to the right ventricle, and is pumped out through the pulmonary trunk. Then that pulmonary trunk is going to separate into the left, because we're leaving away, pulmonary arteries. Notice how they're blue. So these are the left pulmonary arteries on this side. Over here, we see the right pulmonary arteries, branches of the right pulmonary artery. So in other words, you can see the left pulmonary arteries, but the right pulmonary arteries are going behind the superior vena cava in this other big vessel called the aorta. So we can only see those right pulmonary artery, the start of it from the back side of the heart is what I'm saying. Now let's see if I can do this to discard some of that ink and go right back to it. So from the right side, pulmonary, superior and inferior vena cava into the right atrium, down to the right ventricle, out the pulmonary trunk, to the lungs, to the arteries. And then they're going to come back. And when they come back, they're coming into the left side. Now I said most of the front of the heart, and you can see the front of the heart here. It's big, right? Most of the front of the heart is the right side of the heart. The left side, how we know we're on the left side, there's a blood vessel right here, and it's going to pierce into that interventricular septum. So, oh no, I erased my drawing. Sorry about that. But remember, between the ventricles, we have a septum, and there's a blood vessel that I've scratched out right here, a big artery called the anterior. This is on the front of the heart, interventricular artery, because it's between the ventricles. This artery lets you know we're deep to that artery, we're going to have that interventricular septum. And so this is the left ventricle, all of this over here. Making this up here, we just barely see it, our left atrium, because the left atrium is predominantly on the back wall of the heart. Here in a real heart down here, we see our apex. We see this anterior interventricular, and it's twisted a little bit, so we see more of the left side of the heart. But here, that means all of this guy right here, that's all the right ventricle, and it's going to send blood out of the pulmonary trunk. That looks like, I don't know why that's I can't see the pulmonary trunk in here. They're saying that that's the aorta. Here's the aorta for sure, right here, but I don't see the pulmonary trunk. I think it's taking a dive that way. Here is our left ventricle and our left atrium up here. Now the word auricle, here's our right auricle. It looks like a little puffy part of the atrium. It's just it's a part of the atrium that sticks off. So for me, I never ask about the auricles. I just say that this right here, sticking off the side of the heart, and there's some deep into it as the right atrium. Okay, back to this picture over here. Our left ventricle is here, and it's going to wrap around the back of the heart, and blood comes in through our left pulmonary veins from the left lungs and through our right pulmonary veins, and they're going to go behind here into this left atrium, and then the blood will go down into the left ventricle, and when the left ventricle contracts, it sends it up and out through this aorta, and we're going to go to the rest of the body. So remember that our left ventricle sends blood out through the aorta. What else do I want to show you on here? Let's get rid of some of this again. I have to move some stuff that I can see and you cannot see to be able to show you these blood vessels entering and leaving the heart. But here's this inferior vena cava right here, and it's sending blood. It's draining from anywhere above the diaphragm. It's draining. Notice we have these blood vessels here and here that are feeding into it. So this section here, we learn in the blood vessel chapter, they're called the brachiocephalic veins. And we have these subclavian veins and the jugular veins coming down here. And so my point here is you don't have to know a lot of veins and arteries, not a whole lot for this chapter. We learn most of them next time. But the superior vena cava is not a large structure. It goes from the merging of these two veins here, and here's our superior vena cava right there. The aorta, however, when we leave the heart, the aorta is going to go behind the heart. It's got a part that's called the ascending aorta, the aortic arch, and then we start descending because blood's going down through the thoracic cavity. So, and it's going to go all the way down almost to the legs before it splits. So your aorta is very large. We will look at these blood vessels from the back of the heart. Now, I said that coronary circulation was how we service the heart muscle itself, circulation. Where are those coronary vessels? They're these blood vessels here. See the ones I'm tracking? This is called our right coronary artery. We're going to see this in another picture, and they take away everything so we can clearly see these arteries. But this right coronary artery goes down in a groove called the coronary, as a sulcus on this side. This right coronary artery comes directly off the aorta. There's a left coronary artery that comes off and it goes behind this pulmonary trunk, and it branches this left, here we go. Here's our left coronary artery, but you can't see it because we're just looking at a picture. And this left coronary artery is going to branch and it's going to go around the back of the heart. And that guy is going to be called the circumflex artery. And it branches from the left coronary artery into the circumflex. And this artery that goes down and separates our left and right ventricles and pierces into that interventricular septum is that anterior interventricular artery. A lot of people call the anterior interventricular artery the LAD for left. It's on the left side of the heart. Anterior, it's on the front of the heart, descending because the blood's going down. So the LAD is another term for the anterior interventricular artery. And also sometimes it's called the widowmaker, because if you have a blockage in this artery, it's so vitally important to the heart muscle itself that if you have a heart attack in the LAD, it's really bad. Okay, or it can be. We've done our 4 chambers on this picture. We've done the great vessels, leaving and coming. This is the front of the heart. Now, this is the only place you're going to see. Remember on the last slide where I said in the interatrial septum, right here, there's a hole called the foramen ovale. And the foramen ovale, I'm going to move all my stuff again so I can work on this side. So the foramen ovale is a hole between the right and left atria to allow blood in the fetus to go from the right atrium into the left atrium, down to the left ventricle, out of the aorta. So basically it's taking oxygenated blood from the mom, from the placenta, and distributing it through the baby without having to send too much blood to the lungs, because the lungs aren't breathing oxygenated air yet. So if this guy doesn't close, if it closes, it's the fossa ovalis. If it keeps open, it's the PFO, patent foramen ovale. Right here, you see a little piece of, looks like a ligament. That guy right there, it's not labeled and you must know it, is the ligamentum arteriosum. This is another fetal remnant. It's left over a few days after birth. That guy closes up right there. Remnant. When it's closed, we call it the ligamentum arteriosum. When it's open, like you're in your feet, when you're a fetus, it's another fetal shunt to make sure instead of sending all the blood to the lungs, that oxygenated blood that's coming from the right atrium to the left atrium can go down to the left ventricle, and it can go out the aorta. But if we're in the right ventricle and we're sending blood to the lungs, we can just go up through this little shortcut. And the shortcut is called the ductus. Sorry, the artwork isn't great here. This is what I'm working with. Arteriosum. Oh, sorry, arteriosus. Arteriosus. So the ductus arteriosus becomes the ligamentum arteriosum. And that ductus arteriosus, if you are born and it is still open, is called a PDA, patent ductus arteriosus. That needs to be fixed faster than a PFO. You can fix a PFO, patent foramen ovale, quite easily. It's almost the same repair method if you want to look it up for the PFO and the PDA, except for they will take PDA very seriously because you will not only damage the heart, because the heart's pumping, not pumping, it's pumping the blood, but same unit over and over again, let's put it that way. But you can also damage the lungs. Okay, Anything on this picture I haven't shown you? You have to know all the pieces of the heart. Now, if we look at the dorsal surface or dorsal region of the heart, what we're going to see is that everything looks crazy funky, but it's just the back of the heart. And you have to know the back, just like you have to know the front, because the back exists. So we have this right atrium over here. And I know it's the right atrium because here's the apex, the pointy part of the heart. And so that's on the left side. And I'm going to tell you here, this is the posterior interventricular artery. Here it is over here. So it's separating the right ventricle from the left ventricle. All of this, all of that, and this over here, all this stuff, that's all left ventricle. So on the right side of the heart, we have our right atrium here. And remember, it receives blood from the inferior vena cava and the superior vena cava. And it also receives blood from the heart muscle itself through the coronary sinus. This is the first time we see the coronary sinus. You have to know this guy. You can see this guy pretty easily during a heart dissection. It's very large, and look where it is. This is the whole coronary sinus here, and it's dumping blood from the heart muscle itself into this right atrium here. And so I'll try to point out the coronary sinus in other pictures. And so actually, if we go back, remember that this card, take it back. Remember that the coronary arteries are coming directly off the aorta. The aorta's got the freshest blood in it with the oxygen, low carbon dioxide, low waste, etc. So this right coronary artery is coming off. The left coronary artery is coming off, and then it's branching down. And what those arteries do, arteries feed into, let's pretend like we're just in the body. We're leaving the heart. Arteries take blood away from the heart. They feed into the capillary beds of the body. And in this case, the capillary beds are there, in all cases, they're microscopic. You can't see them. So blood is going in this direction. And when they go through the capillary beds, that's where we exchange gases and anything else we want to exchange. And the blood goes back to the heart through veins. Okay, so what we can't see on this picture, we can see blue things and we can see red things. Those are the arteries. They get smaller and smaller and feed into the capillaries, and then they come out the other side and they travel along the same path, but all these, the blood in the arteries is coming down, and in the veins, it's going up in the heart and around to that back coronary sinus. All of the venous blood is being drained this way, like this. Okay, so there's your coronary sinus. Now, how do I know where the left atrium is? It's in a dissection, it's not colored. You know, we don't have blue and red to guide us, right? If you see these four things sticking off the back, structure like this is the left atrium. These are the pulmonary veins, and here we had the left side of the heart. Remember, this is the apex. So these pulmonary veins are leaving or bringing blood from the left lung into that left atrium. The right pulmonary veins, the right lung is over here. It's bigger than that, but it's sending blood, oxygenated blood, into that left atrium through the right pulmonary veins. So study that, right and left and all the good stuff. So from the left atrium, we go down into the left ventricle, and when it's pumped, it comes out this aorta. Here are three vessels that are not labeled yet, but you might as well, you have to know them for this chapter. And this is the backwards view. So in the front, you've got the first branch off the aorta. The first branch off the aorta, besides the coronary arteries, is going to be the brachiocephalic artery. Brachiocephalic artery. If you remember what brachio means, it means arm. So this is going to serve the right side, the right arm, and the right side of the head. the brachiocephalic artery, because it's going to branch and go up to the right carotid artery, and then another down the arm like this, right subclavian. This guy is going straight up. This is the second branch, but blood's coming out of it. It's going straight up the left side of your neck. This is your left common carotid. Left common carotid artery. The next one is going underneath the subclavian down into the arm. So this is the left subclavian artery. Subclavian means under the clavicle. Okay, so you're learning them from behind. If you're looking at them from the front, the aorta goes like this. The first branch is going to be the brachiocephalic, because it's going to keep on going, really. And it's going to go up this way. And this is going to be the right subclavian. And this is going to be the right common carotid. And here we have our brachiocephalic. This is our brachiocephalic from the front. That does not say brachiocephalic, but okay. The next one coming off, going straight up the neck, left common carotid. The next one matches up with this guy over here. It'll be the left subclavian. So there's your three branches from the front: brachiocephalic, left common carotid, left subclavian. Obviously, they're going to be reversed if you turn the heart backwards. I bet you're about fed up with this. If you need to take a break, please do, and start over. Okay, from the back, we see our pulmonary arteries. This is the right pulmonary artery, so it's taking blood to the right lung to drop off carbon dioxide and pick up oxygen. This is our left pulmonary artery, so it's going to our left lung, and it's to drop off carbon dioxide, pick up oxygen. So after they go to the lungs, remember that they go back in, they go to lungs, and they go back in to the left atrium. Back in after they drop off the carbon dioxide and pick up the oxygen. Let me look for stuff that I've not mentioned. I don't require you guys to know any of the coronary veins. See this great cardiac vein? You can learn them in the future. The middle cardiac vein. For my class, we do the arteries and the small cardiac vein. I never ask you those cardiac veins. I'm more interested in the coronary arteries. You do have to know your coronary arteries for this. Okay. I think we have gone over everything in this picture. Let's open up the heart. Let's do a coronal. Let's open up. Let's do a coronal cut section of the heart. Remove the front of the heart and actually look what this looks like. This, if we get our bearings, this is our right atrium. Here's our left atrium. That means below it, down here, is our left ventricle, and below it down here is our right ventricle. The right ventricle looks very large. When you do a dissection, people are usually pretty surprised at how small it is compared to the left ventricle. Things to point out. If you're doing a dissection, nothing's going to be color-coded, but you definitely know which side of the body is the left side, because you've got the apex, right, of the heart. But if it's open and you're confused, you've lost your bearings, look how thick the walls of the left ventricle are. They have to be that thick because they're contracting with enough force to send the blood out through the aorta and through the body, up to the head and down to the very tippy toes, to the tippy fingers. And so the left ventricle is a very meaty, you can definitely identify that in a dissection, compared to the thin walls of the right ventricle. Remember, the walls are made of the cardiomyocytes. So they're called, cardiomyocytes are the heart muscle cells. So this is called the myocardium, the heart walls themselves. That's called the myocardium. made of cardiac muscle tissue. The inner lining is the endocardium. Look that back up. The outer part, the epicardium. Please, you can watch that in the last video. Okay, so I'm going to mark this up and then clean it up, and we're going to keep doing this. Blood goes into from the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava, and here is the hole that the blood is coming in from the coronary sinus into this right atrium. Then blood goes down to the right ventricle, and then it goes out the pulmonary trunk, and it's either going to go to the left pulmonary arteries to the left lung, or to the right pulmonary arteries to go to the right lung. Once oxygen is picked up, the oxygenated blood goes back from the right lung to the right pulmonary veins, from the left lungs to the left pulmonary veins, and those are going into this left atrium. And so that blood goes from the left atrium down here to the left ventricle. And then when it pumps, the left ventricle sends it out to the entire body. That's blood flow through the heart. What we've not mentioned so far are the actual valves. If you look at the walls of the atria and the walls of the ventricles, they look very different from one another, right? Look how thin-walled the atria is. They're very thin-walled compared to the myocardium and the ventricle, because as blood goes in, the blood is passively going to flow into the ventricles, and then the atria, both the right and the left, will give us a slight contraction to send the rest of the blood down into the ventricles that have been at rest. And when the ventricles contract and send the blood out of the pulmonary trunk or the aorta, then it's going to be a more forceful contraction. We get into atrial diastole and systole and ventricular diastole and systole later on in the lectures. For right now, we'll just use the term contract. So blood comes in both atria, right and left, goes down to the ventricles, and then is pumped out, correct? Well, we have these valves between the atria and ventricle. Here's a valve right here, all this white stuff, and here's a valve right here, all that white stuff. These are the valves between the atria and the ventricles, so they are called the atrioventricular valves. Atrioventricular valves, and their purpose is to prevent backflow of blood. We want blood to go in one direction in the heart, from the atria to the ventricles and out, right? And we don't want it to go from the atria to the ventricles and then back up into the atria. Not a good situation. So the atrioventriculars prevent backflow of blood from the ventricles to the atria. It would be better said, they prevent regurgitation of blood from the ventricles into the atria. That is not a normal way that blood flows from ventricle to atria. So these atrioventricular valves, if you're on the right side, it's called the right AV valve. That guy's called the tricuspid valve. It prevents blood, tricuspid valve. It prevents blood from going from the right ventricle back into the right atrium. That's the wrong way. On the left side of the heart, the left AV valve is called the mitral valve. Now you can call it the bicuspid because it only has two little flaps to it, but most likely you're going to hear it as mitral valve. So on the left side, we have the mitral valve. You can also call it the bicuspid valve, but this is the mitral valve. What it does is it prevents regurgitation of blood from this left ventricle back into the left atrium. We don't want the left ventricle to be pumping the same unit of blood over and over and over again. So we want a one-way direction of blood flow, and those AV valves make sure that the blood goes from the atria to the ventricles and not back up into the atria. So how do they do that? They're very fascinating. We'll go into this in another lecture, but this is, you see these little bumps that come up down here? They're very nipple-like structures. They're called the papillary muscles. And attached to these papillary muscles, they're already written there, are the core D, tendon EE. First E, second E. The chordae tendineae E are the heartstrings attached to the papillary muscles. Here are the papillary muscles, here are the heartstrings, and they're attached to those valves. I'll go ahead and tell you, I'm just so excited. So if the blood comes from the right atria down into the ventricles and they contract, those valves could be blown back up into the atria, but those chordae tendineae, and I will go into this in more detail later, they help hold down those valves to make sure that they don't invert and go back up into the atria. And what do the papillary muscles do? Right before the ventricles contract, the papillary muscles contract just to give a little tautness, because all the pressure that builds up in here, well, it's going to be filling up, and this ventricle is going to contract, and this valve is going to start shutting. But when this ventricle contracts, we want the blood to go this way and not back up that way. And so these strings prevent that from happening. It just tethers them a little better, so you don't have an incompetent valve. Now, the valves at the base of the pulmonary trunk, here's a pulmonary trunk. So this valve right here, it actually has 3 cusps to it, but it's called the pulmonary semilunar valve. You can just call it the pulmonary valve. But if you hear the term semilunar, the semilunar valves, they do the same thing as the AV valves in a different way. The AV valves are for preventing this blood from regurgitating back up into the atria. These SL valves, the semilunar valves, are preventing blood from this left ventricle that's going to pump blood this way. And then when the left ventricle relaxes, the blood will tend to fall back into the left ventricle. Well, it can't, because this valve will be closed. Likewise, when the right ventricle contracts, it sends blood up into the pulmonary trunk. And when that right ventricle relaxes, then the blood's going to want to fall back down. Well, this pulmonary semilunar valve prevents regurgitation or backflow of blood into the ventricles. So it prevents blood flow from either the pulmonary valve, pulmonary trunk into the right ventricle. If I said at the base of the aorta, and this is it right here, there is an aortic semilunar valve. What do you think that guy does? What is the purpose of the aortic semilunar valve? Yep, you probably guessed it. When blood comes up, it prevents blood from falling back down into this left ventricle. So the aortic valve does the same as the pulmonary valve, but for the left ventricle. Our valves, our heart valves, are very important. And if there's a prolapse, meaning say in this mitral valve, if you have mitral valve prolapse, when that left ventricle contracts with all of the force, you want all of the blood to go up into the aorta. If it goes back, if you have an incompetent valve, instead of being closed, it opens a little bit, and some of the blood can get back up into this left atrium. Now, it depends on how bad the mitral valve prolapse is as to whether you're going to have symptoms or not, or if they're going to do anything about it. But that's what a prolapse is. You can see down here, there are 3. Here's 1, 2, 3. That's the pulmonary valve. There are 3 cusp to that. There are 3 cusps. I can see one right here. It's like triangle shaped. Here's another one, and here's another one on this side for the aortic semilunar valve. If we look at the mitral valve, though, it's hard to tell what's going on, but there are only 2 valves there. Instead, it's the only AV or SL valve that has 2 cusps instead of 3. The tricuspid valve will have 3. Here we can see those heartstrings coming out here, and these are the valves up here. But the heartstrings, again, are called the chordae tendineae. Can I call them chordae tendineae? Yes. Can I call them heartstrings? No. They're the chordae tendineae attached to the papillary muscles. Oh, and I did forget to tell you the back woven wall of the ventricle. Here's a word to know, because you see it on your dissections quite easily. And hopefully we'll see it in future slides, but the back of the walls of the ventricles look woven. It's really pretty when you're doing a dissection and you see these woven walls, and the papillary muscles are quite obvious because they are coming out from the woven walls and they have these chordae tendineae attached to them. But the woven part of the wall is called the trabeculae. I took my time and wrote that. Carnii. Carnii. Trabeculae carnii. Carnii. The woven walls of the ventricles and ventricles. The atria don't have trabeculae carnii. Their walls are very particular. It has a combed like the stripes that go in one direction. So in the atria, instead of seeing trabeculae carnii, you see what are called the pectinate muscles. Pectinate muscles. There you go. Okay. Anything I've not done here so far? I think we've gone over everything. If we haven't, look it up because you have to know it. Okay, on this picture, it just shows you a great way to see how if these ventricles are contracting and sending blood up to the aorta or the pulmonary trunk, it's sort of a twisting motion of the myocardium. So it's sort of a ringing of the heart when it's pumping the blood up. So this is a great picture showing you that. But also the heart has a fibrous skeleton within the heart muscles itself. You can see in a microscopic view, it sort of has this appearance of it's a fibrous skeleton. It's just not a cardiac muscle. I'll show you in a future slide. How's that? Can you see how when the heart contracts, it sort of rings and pushes that blood up? I hope so. Hand motions help. Okay, let's do these valves. I hope you're taking breaks as needed. This is a lot of stuff. If we're just looking at the left side of the heart, there's going to be a hard time. It says this left atrium is contracted, but at first, blood is just passively flowing into the left atrium and the atrium's relaxing. And then the atria will contract and send most of the blood just falls right from the left atrium into the left ventricle. And it starts filling up here. And you see the woven trabeculae carnii, by the way, in the back there. The blood starts filling up, so pressure starts building in the ventricle. When enough pressure builds and that left ventricle is going to contract, you have all this blood up here in this aortic valve that's just sitting there from the last contraction. What this left ventricle has to do is it has to contract forcefully enough to send whatever blood is in this aorta now on its way. Because when this left ventricle contracts over here, the blood goes up, the left ventricle relaxes, it starts to fall back down. And we saw that these guys, the AV valves, the mitral valve, or the tricuspid valve, they have the chordae tendineae attached to them. The semilunar valves work differently. Blood goes up, and then as the blood comes back down, it closes those cusp of in this case, the aortic semilunar valve. And so this left ventricle, when it contracts, it has to overcome whatever blood is in here to force this blood forward and move the next unit of blood in. So notice when this ventricle here it's big and open, it's nice and relaxed, ventricular diastole. When it's in ventricular systole, when the left ventricle contracts, it's closed up some. Notice the blood can only go in one direction, up and through that aortic semilunar valve, because it's going to press on these guys, and we've got the chordae tendineae to make sure that those two valves don't open up and allow the blood to go back into the left atrium. Yeah. Valves are important. Valves ensure one-way flow of blood through the heart. Wonder if you have to know everything on this picture. You do. You already know everything on this picture, by the way. The thing that's not labeled is this brachiocephalic artery, the left common carotid, and the left subclavian, but you have to know those. It's not, a lot of stuff's not labeled. The apex, the epicardium, the myocardium, the endocardium, which is just made of simple squamous cells, the papillary muscles, the trabeculae carnii, the chordae tendineae, the valves, etc. If you follow this picture, let's find number one. Here's number one. We start in the right atrium. Blood goes through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle, out to the pulmonary valve, to the pulmonary trunk, and it either goes to the left branches of the pulmonary artery to go to the left lung, or the blood will go to the right pulmonary arteries to go to the right lung. Drop off oxygen, carbon dioxide, excuse me, pick up oxygen, and that oxygenated blood will go back to the left atrium through these right pulmonary veins, left pulmonary veins. All four of these dump into that left atrium. Blood flows through the mitral valve into the left ventricle. The left ventricle contracts and sends it out through the aortic valve into this ascending aorta, aortic arch, and down the descending aorta. Please know blood flow through the heart. Be very comfortable with it. Close your eyes, see if you can do it, self-quiz as much as possible. Okay, here is blood flow through the heart. And I kind of like this diagram a whole lot because it starts with the superior and inferior vena cava. And remember, they dump into the right atrium. But what else dumps into the right atrium? This coronary sinus. The cardiac veins are delivering blood to the coronary sinus. So this right atrium receives blood from the coronary sinus and the superior and inferior vena cava. Then it goes from the right atrium through the tricuspid valve. We just did this through the right ventricle. And then after the right ventricle, it's going to be pumped through the pulmonary semilunar valve into the pulmonary trunk, into the pulmonary arteries, goes to the lungs, picks up oxygen, drops off carbon dioxide. And then that blood is now oxygenated, and it will go from the lungs into the left side of the heart. How? These four pulmonary veins dump into the left atrium. And from the left atrium, we go to the mitral valve, through the mitral valve into the left ventricle. When the left ventricle contracts, it sends the blood, it opens up that aortic semilunar valve and sends the blood into the aorta. Then the aorta is now going to send blood to the tissues, to the capillary beds of the body, to the systemic circulation. You've got nice, fresh, oxygenated, high oxygen blood here, low carbon dioxide. And then the reverse will be said, the body tissues will take out all the oxygen and add carbon dioxide, and then we start this whole cycle over. But look at this aorta, how it not only goes to serve the body, it serves the heart muscle itself, the heart tissue, and through those coronary arteries. The aorta, the coronary arteries, right and left, branch directly off the aorta, serve the heart tissue by going through the capillary beds, and then all the capillary beds form into veins called the cardiac veins, which dump into the coronary sinus, which go into the right atrium. If you're wondering, do we have to know all this? Yes, you have to know all this. You have to know it so comfortably that your next dinner conversation should only be about this. Okay, well, here is a great picture of just the coronary arteries and veins. In the future, you learn these cardiac veins if you're in my class. Now you're going to need to know these coronary arteries. If someone has a heart attack or a myocardial infarction, it's going to be a blockage of one of these arteries on this side of the picture. Here's that aorta. Here's showing the aortic valve. But notice how the right coronary artery branches directly off the aorta, and it's going to wrap around. Here's the marginal artery. So here's another one you have to know. You have to know the right marginal artery, the right coronary artery, these two. This goes down the margin of the heart. The left is branching off, and notice how it's going behind the pulmonary trunk. And so really on heart models, a lot of them, you barely see the very beginning of the left coronary artery before it branches into this anterior interventricular artery. And we also called that the LAD, or the left anterior descending artery. So the left coronary artery branches into the LAD and the circumflex artery. So these are those arteries that you have to know, that I have, the coronary arteries that you have to know. We also have the posterior interventricular artery. It's on the back of the heart. It is separating the left and right ventricles. Okay, those are your coronary arteries. If you hear that people have to get bypass surgery, if there's a blockage, wonder if I can, I know I can, because I am strong like bull. Change that color. Say we got a blockage right here. Well, blood is flowing down this way to the heart muscle itself. Well, if you have a blockage or the beginning of a blockage, an occlusion, then say your arteries like this, and you've got atherosclerosis and fatty buildup and etc. If you actually get a blood clot that sticks in there, an embolus comes along and causes an embolism, then you could have a heart attack. What's happening is none of the blood can get past this occlusion. And so a lot of times you'll know ahead of time, I guess, the state of your arteries, because you will feel it if you start exercising, walk upstairs, etc. If you don't have this blood clot here and you are just narrowing like this, say, and you have vasoconstriction, those little coronary arteries constrict, they will constrict to where they occlude, they prevent the flow of blood through here, even without a clot. So if you have pain while you're moving and exercising, and etc., and it goes away when you rest, that's a good sign that you have a buildup in your arteries. And so if they do a bypass surgery, they might take an artery or a vein from some other area of the body, let's say one of the veins from the legs, and they'll attach it here, and they'll bypass that area. So blood will flow from the aorta to the rest of the heart before you actually have a heart attack. If you have one bypass, if you have two bypasses, if you have three bypasses, what have you heard these? I had to have a triple bypass. I had to have a double bypass. I had to have a quadruple bypass. It depends on how many occlusions you have on the bypasses that must be done to keep your heart from having a heart attack. I highly suggest that you look up those. My watch just told me it's time to stand up. I highly suggest you watch videos on bypass surgeries. They're fascinating. Okay, let's erase all that and see if I can go to the next page. Hold my mouth right. Oh, okay. So this is a picture from a cadaver. It's always nice to see some reality, and it's hard to know where we are, but see this guy right here? This is the rectus abdominis muscle, your six-pack muscles. I can just see part of that muscle right there. And we see part of a lung here, and this is a lung. This is the whole heart. All of this is the heart, but you don't see the heart, do you? No, because it's covered by the fibrous pericardium, that really tough sac. And if we were to cut into that fibrous pericardium and open it up, what's going to line the inside of that tough bag is going to be the parietal pericardium. And the visceral pericardium is going to be on the outer at the visceral pericardium. It's the second part of that serous membrane, recall, and it's just called the epicardium. Okay. So the fibrous pericardium is this sac, and you really have to cut through it. Now, what's interesting on this guy right here, I see the glandular tissue. This is the thymus retracted. If you remember from the endocrine system, the thymus helps development of our immune system and our lymphocytes. But with age, it atrophies and it shrivels up and turns just into fat. It's very hard to find a thymus in an adult cadaver, or at least it was for me, but I could find this one because you can actually see the glandular tissue. Yay. Okay. Now, if we take all that off and we take off this is actually a different donor altogether, but here is our right lung. All of this is the right lung. All of this is the left lung. And you see where we've cut right here and we put the heart back into the chest, but where it's cut, that is the aorta. Right here is the pulmonary trunk. And so I can see this little squirmy like thing? That is our left. All of this is the left anterior descending artery. See this little wormy thing here? It's going down like this. That is our right coronary artery coming off of this aorta. And so all of this, by the way, that is all of the right ventricle. And the left ventricle, here's the apex. The left ventricle is going around the back of the heart. Notice how it's not color-coded. There's no color coding in the human body. And so here we have the right atrium up here. Look at this really nice LAD. It's really big and sticking off. You know, you had to pull a bunch of stuff off the heart to get to this point. And that right coronary artery is coming all the way down this way, perhaps going this way a little bit. Here is the pulmonary trunk, and here is the aorta. Okay, this is the same, we've been going over this, same stuff. I like this picture a whole lot though. So we have our aorta, our pulmonary trunk, our ligamentum arteriosum, this is review, our superior vena cava and our inferior vena cava. They feed into this right atrium, which feeds into the right ventricle, which takes blood out through the pulmonary trunk to the left and the right lungs, through the pulmonary arteries. Blood comes back through the left pulmonary veins and the right pulmonary veins into this left atrium. Then the blood goes down into the left ventricle and it will be shot out through the aorta. So all of this we have already done before. Just a different artist view. It's a fantastic drawing. Now here's the back. It's the back of the heart. And how do I know which is the left and the right? Well, first of all, this apex means this is the left. And so most of the left side is on the back. So that tells me this is the posterior interventricular artery under this vein. So this is the right ventricle, and all of this from here over is the left ventricle. We can tell the difference between the left ventricle and the left atrium because this coronary sinus separates the left ventricle from the left atrium. But with the left atrium, we know we're in the left atrium when we see these guys here. So all of this that I'm circling is the left atrium. These are the pulmonary veins coming from the left lung. These are the pulmonary veins coming from the right lung. And then blood will go into this left ventricle and out through the aorta. So here's our superior vena cava. It's hard to get your bearings. This is the back of the heart. So this is the left side, keep in mind. So that means this is sending blood to the left lung. So that's a left pulmonary artery. Here's the right pulmonary artery sending blood to the right lung. You need to practice as much as you can with the back, the forward, all the sides. All right. Oh, this is a nightmare to try to decipher. But I like this view because we can clearly see a coronary sinus here. And we know this is our left ventricle here. And our left atrium will be here. Let me show you up here. Imagine a hole here. I hope I'm remembering this correctly. It's been a long time since I did this dissection. But up here, these guys are A and hopefully E, as I've drawn it here, are sending blood out to the lungs. So these are the pulmonary arteries. Branching off the pulmonary trunk. This is the back of the heart, so you can't see the pulmonary trunk. Maybe you can. No. Here is the aorta. You probably guess that that's the aorta. The superior vena cava, the inferior vena cava. So I'm doing this by an order of, what's left over. This must all be right here, the left atrium, because I see pulmonary veins here. And I've cut this a little close, you know, it's harder than when you're just drawing a picture, but that F would be also the pulmonary veins coming from the right. There's the right pulmonary veins. And so this whole area is left atrium. The right atrium, we're coming in this way, so it's more on the front of the heart. I'm not going to give you a real heart, human heart, and ask you to do that on a lab practical because we don't have cadavers in this lab. Here's our superior vena cava sending blood into the right atrium. Here's the inferior vena cava. Blood comes in. Now in this picture, it shows the fossa ovalis, which is the fetal remnant to the foramen ovale. And the blood would come in also from the coronary sinus, and blood would go through this tricuspid valve into the right ventricle, out through the pulmonary valve, to the pulmonary trunk. We could just do this over and over and over again, right? But on the back walls, you have that trabeculae carnii. Here are your chordae tendineae attached to your papillary muscles, attached to the tricuspid. And then if we go to the left side, we have the mitral valve, the chordae tendineae, the papillary muscles, and the back walls are the trabeculae carnii. Notice the left ventricle has that really thickened myocardium, and the right ventricle has a much thinner myocardium because we're only sending blood from the right side of the heart to the lungs. Here I can see our pulmonary valve, and this is our aortic valve. So blood is going here, and the aorta is behind this pulmonary trunk. Here in this picture, you can actually see the pectinate muscles of the atria. There's your apex. We have these words here. The endocardium is just made of simple squamous epithelial cells called endothelial cells. These cells are continuous with the lining. This inner lining here, it'd be like just a little lining, would be continuous with the blood vessels that leave the heart. The myocardium is the muscle, and the epicardium is that outer part of it's the visceral pericardium. Phew, this has been a long one. Oh, this is really cool. One time I found a eustachian valve. I've only found one. At the base of the inferior vena cava, don't expect to find this on any pictures. This valve is a fetal remnant. Doesn't matter if you have it, doesn't matter if you don't have it. But remember that we want to send blood from the inferior vena cava up into the right atria and then straight over into the left atria when we're a fetus through the foramen ovale, because we don't want to send blood to the lungs because we're not picking up oxygen there. So this eustachian valve at the base of the inferior vena cava helps shuttle that blood towards that foramen ovale, and it's really neat to see it in an adult. There would be no negative consequences to having that eustachian valve. Beautiful dissection. Here is the aorta coming up, right? And we can see this first branch, which is the brachiocephalic, left common carotid, and our left subclavian arteries. Here's the superior vena cava taking blood this way. And we don't see the inferior vena cava because it's in the back. But look at the trabeculae carnii. This is a papillary muscle. Here's a papillary muscle. And there's chordae tendineae. This is the left ventricular, this is the ventricular septum, interventricular septum, separating the left. Look how thick the walls are here, how thin the right ventricle walls are. And everything that you see that's solid up here, that's actual valve. So that's a tricuspid valve. We don't really see the bicuspid valve or the mitral valve because it's up higher. But you can see the pulmonary valve, these little flimsy white things here. Okay. I feel like I have talked for 18 hours. That is the end of the anatomy portion of the heart, and you have to know this. Backwards and forwards. I believe in you. Good luck.